Sean Oakman. At 6 feet 9 inches and 280 pounds, Sean Oakman looked like someone crossed a grizzly bear with a skyscraper. This dude had 6% body fat. That's basically what bodybuilders hit for competitions, while squatting over 600 pounds and running a 4.8 40. That's not supposed to be possible. Watching Oakman rush the passer was like witnessing a natural disaster in real time. Offensive linemen, guys who are massive by normal standards, looked like middle schoolers trying to block a freight train. His wingspan was so ridiculous that quarterbacks probably had nightmares about those arms reaching over blockers like some kind of horror movie monster. The craziest part? He moved with the agility of someone half his size. Most guys that big lumber around like they're walking through quicksand, but Oakman had this fluid athleticism that just broke your brain. When he'd drop into coverage, yeah, this mountain of a man could cover receivers, it was definitely crazy. Baylor knew they had something special, and opposing offenses knew they were in trouble the second they saw number 98 line up across from them. Julius Peppers. Julius Peppers might be the most gifted athlete to ever step on a college campus, and that's not hyperbole. At 6 feet 7 inches and 295 pounds, this man ran a 4.5 40-yard dash. Let that sink in. There are wide receivers who can't run that fast, and they're carrying about 100 fewer pounds. But here's where it gets really stupid. Peppers wasn't just a football player. He was legitimately good at basketball too, playing for North Carolina's team that made the Final Four. Picture this: a nearly 300-pound defensive end who could dunk on 7-footers and then turn around and terrorize quarterbacks on Saturday. It's like someone took the best parts of different sports and crammed them into one person. The way Peppers moved defied physics. He'd explode off the line with the quickness of a much smaller player, then use that ridiculous reach to bat down passes or strip the ball. Offensive coordinators probably lost sleep trying to figure out how to block someone who combined the size of a lineman with the speed of a linebacker and the agility of a safety. North Carolina had a guy with superpowers wearing number 49, and everyone else was just trying to keep up. Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett looked like someone took a comic book superhero and dropped him into college football. At 6 feet 5 inches and 270 pounds, he ran a 4.64 40 while benching 450 pounds and squatting 700. Those numbers sound made up, but they're real, and they explain why quarterbacks started having trust issues. What made Garrett truly terrifying wasn't just his size or speed, it was how he combined them. He'd line up at defensive end, and you could literally see offensive linemen's souls leave their bodies. This dude would bend around blocks like he was made of rubber, then explode through gaps that shouldn't have existed. His first step was so violent that it looked like he was shot out of a cannon. Texas A&M basically had to warn opposing teams about what they were about to witness. Garrett would regularly make plays that had announcers running out of adjectives. He'd chase down running backs from behind despite giving them a 10-yard head start. Or he'd bull rush a 320-pound tackle like he was moving a piece of furniture. The SEC is full of freaks, but even by those standards, Garrett was operating on a different level entirely. College football had never seen anything quite like him. Calvin Johnson. Calvin Johnson earned the nickname Megatron in the NFL, but honestly, he was already a transformer in college. At 6 feet 5 inches and 240 pounds, Johnson had the size of a tight end, but moved like he was 180 pounds soaking wet. His 42-inch vertical jump meant he was basically playing a different sport than everyone else on the field. Georgia Tech knew they had something special, but even they probably didn't realize just how unfair Johnson was going to be. This man would run routes that should have been impossible for someone his size. Crisp cuts, sudden direction changes, acceleration that made defensive backs look like they were running in sand. Then he'd go up for a ball and suddenly he's 3 feet higher than everyone else. The most ridiculous part was watching defensive coordinators try to game plan for him. Double coverage? Johnson would just outmuscle both defenders. Bracket coverage? He'd find the soft spot and make the catch look routine. Press coverage? Good luck pressing someone who could run past you and over you at the same time. College football had seen big receivers before, but nobody had seen a big receiver who moved like a small one while jumping like he had springs in his legs. By the way, if you're loving these genetic freaks, smash that subscribe button. We're just getting started with these lab-created monsters. Ndamukong Suh. Ndamukong Suh was built like someone took a bulldozer and taught it to play football. At 6 feet 4 inches and 300 pounds, he moved with a violence and explosiveness that made grown men reconsider their career choices. Nebraska had unleashed something that belonged in a different era of football, maybe the era where they fought with clubs. What separated Suh from other big defensive tackles was his motor. Most guys that size take plays off because they have to. The human body isn't designed to move 300 pounds at full speed for 3 hours. But Suh played every snap like his life depended on it, chasing down plays from sideline to sideline with a relentlessness that was honestly kind of scary. The way he'd shed blocks was pure violence. Offensive linemen would get their hands on him and suddenly find themselves on the ground wondering what just happened. Suh had this ability to generate power from angles that shouldn't have been possible, throwing grown men around like they were tackling dummies. Big 12 offensive coordinators probably had PTSD from watching film of this man destroying their carefully crafted blocking schemes. He wasn't just playing football, he was conducting a masterclass in controlled chaos. Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney cemented himself in college football lore with one of the most violent hits in the sport's history. And honestly, that was just him getting warmed up. At 6 feet 5 inches and 266 pounds, Clowney ran a 4.5340 while putting up insane numbers in the weight room. But numbers don't capture the pure terror he brought to every snap. South Carolina had a weapon that opposing coaches couldn't really prepare for. How do you game plan against someone who's faster than your running backs, stronger than your linemen, and more explosive than your linebackers? Clowney would line up, and you could see quarterbacks start calculating escape routes before the ball was even snapped. The most insane thing about Clowney was his closing speed. He'd be blocked initially, and then suddenly he'd be in the backfield destroying everything in sight. That famous hit against Michigan where he separated the running back from his helmet, the ball, and probably his soul, that wasn't a fluke. That was just Clowney operating at his normal level of controlled violence. The SEC is supposed to be where freaks go to compete against other freaks, but even by those standards, Clowney was playing a different game entirely. Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson was given the nickname All Day for his punishing style and dominance over opponents early on. And honestly, that might have been underselling it. At 6 feet 1 inch and 217 pounds, Peterson ran a 4.440 while squatting 540 pounds and benching 365. But those numbers don't capture the pure violence he brought to every carry. This man ran like he was personally offended by the concept of being tackled. What made Peterson truly terrifying was his combination of breakaway speed and punishing power. He'd hit a gap with the force of a battering ram, break through the first level of defenders, then suddenly he's running past safeties like they're standing still. Big 12 defenses learned that tackling Peterson wasn't really an option. You just had to hope you could slow him down enough for help to arrive. The most insane thing about Peterson was watching him break tackles. This dude would get hit by multiple defenders and somehow emerge from the pile running faster than when he went in. His leg drive was so powerful that he'd regularly carry 3 or 4 defenders for extra yards, dragging them along like they were children hanging onto his jersey. The Oklahoma running back who seemed to get stronger as the game went on, turning fourth quarter carries into highlight reels that made defensive coordinators question if stopping him was even possible. Peterson wasn't just running the ball. He was conducting a masterclass in controlled violence that left defenders wondering what just hit them. Von Miller. Von Miller looked like someone took a cheetah and taught it pass rush moves. At 6 feet 3 inches and 250 pounds, he ran a 4.49 40-yard dash, which is just stupid fast for someone his size. But Miller wasn't just fast in a straight line. He had this twitchy, explosive first step that made offensive tackles look helpless. Texas A&M knew they had something special in Miller, but even they probably didn't expect him to redefine what a pass rusher could look like. This dude would bend around blocks like he was made of liquid, then explode into the backfield with a violence that was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. His spin move was so quick that offensive linemen would still be turning around while Miller was already celebrating a sack. What made Miller truly unfair was his football IQ combined with that ridiculous athleticism. He'd study film like a scholar, then use that knowledge to exploit the tiniest weaknesses in blocking schemes. Quarterbacks learned to fear that pre-snap look Miller would give them. like a predator sizing up its prey. The Big 12 had seen fast pass rushers before, but nobody had seen someone combine Miller's speed with his technique and football intelligence. He was basically playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Cam Newton. Cam Newton was built like a linebacker, but threw like a quarterback and ran like a running back. At 6 feet 5 inches and 245 pounds, Newton was bigger than most defensive players while being more athletic than most skill position players. Auburn had basically won the lottery in getting Newton, the perfect prototype for a quarterback who seemed like he had to have been designed in a laboratory somewhere. What made Newton truly unfair was his combination of arm strength and mobility. This dude could stand in the pocket and rifle passes 60 yards downfield. Then, on the next play, he'd take off running and truck linebackers who thought they had an angle on him. Defensive coordinators probably had nightmares trying to figure out how to contain someone who was a legitimate threat to beat you with his arm or his legs on every single play. The most insane thing about Newton was watching him in short yardage situations. Most quarterbacks hand the ball off or throw a quick slant. Newton would just lower his shoulder and run through people like they weren't there. He'd regularly bulldoze through goal line stands that included multiple 300-pound defensive linemen. The SEC had seen dual-threat quarterbacks before, but nobody had seen someone who was equally dangerous throwing, running, and basically playing linebacker when he needed to. Newton was playing a different sport than everyone else on the field. Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley's legs looked like they were carved out of marble by someone who really understood anatomy. At 6 feet and 233 pounds, Barkley combined the power of a fullback with the speed of a wide receiver and the agility of a dancer. Penn State had a running back who seemed to defy several laws of physics on a weekly basis. What made Barkley truly special wasn't just his physical gifts, it was how he used them. This man would hit a hole with the violence of a freight train, then suddenly cut back with the grace of a ballet dancer, leaving defenders grasping at air. His 41-inch vertical jump meant he could literally hurdle over people who thought they had him stopped, and his 4.4 speed meant good luck catching him once he got to the second level. The most ridiculous thing about Barkley was his vision combined with that otherworldly athleticism. He'd see gaps that shouldn't have existed, then explode through them with a burst that made defensive backs look like they were running in quicksand. Big Ten defenses learned to fear number 26 because you never knew if he was going to run around you, through you, or over you. Barkley wasn't just playing running back. He was redefining what the position could look like when you had someone with video game attributes carrying the ball. J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt's college story reads like someone's fever dream about the perfect underdog transformation. This dude started as a 6'5" tight end at Central Michigan, then transferred to Wisconsin and somehow turned into a 290-pound defensive end who moved like he was still 250. The transformation was so dramatic that scouts probably thought they were looking at a completely different person. What made Watt absolutely ridiculous was his motor combined with that freakish athleticism. At Wisconsin, he'd line up at defensive end and just refuse to be blocked by anyone. His 37-inch vertical jump meant he was swatting down passes like he was playing volleyball, while his relentless pursuit meant running backs were getting chased down from behind by a man who had no business being that fast at that size. The most insane thing about Watt was his work ethic translating into pure dominance. This man would spend extra hours in the gym, then show up on Saturday and make it look effortless when he was throwing around 320-pound offensive tackles. Big Ten offensive coordinators probably had nightmares about trying to account for someone who could rush the passer, drop into coverage, and even line up at fullback in goal line situations. Wisconsin had found a player who was too versatile and too athletic for college football, and everyone knew he was just getting started. Watt proved that sometimes the scariest lab creation is the one that builds itself through pure obsession and genetic gifts. Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack was built like someone took the best parts of every defensive position and combined them into one player. At 6 feet 3 inches and 251 pounds, Mack had the size to play linebacker, the speed to cover receivers, and the power to rush the passer. Buffalo had a defensive weapon that belonged in a much bigger conference. What made Mack truly terrifying was his versatility. This dude could line up anywhere on the defense and immediately become the most dangerous player on the field. He'd drop into coverage and pick off passes like a safety. Then on the next play, he'd rush the passer and destroy offensive tackles like a defensive end. Mac Conference offenses probably had PTSD from trying to figure out where Mac was going to line up and what kind of havoc he was going to create. The most insane thing about Mac was his motor. He played every snap like it was the Super Bowl, chasing down plays from sideline to sideline with a relentlessness that was honestly exhausting to watch. His combination of speed, power, and football IQ meant that offensive coordinators couldn't really scheme around him. He was just going to make plays regardless of what they tried to do. Buffalo had a player who was too good for their level of competition, and everyone knew it. These genetic freaks proved that sometimes nature just decides to break its own rules. Each one of these players looked like they were designed in a lab specifically to dominate college football, and honestly, watching them play was like witnessing evolution in real time. Subscribe for more breakdowns of the most ridiculous athletes to ever step on a field.